For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Paul and I'm on team here. So today we're continuing our series in Colossians that Steve kicked off last week. And I get the joy today of walking through, I think, what's arguably one of the most poetic and powerful parts of the whole letter of Colossians. And that's Colossians 1:15 to 22. Now, last time Steve helped us get our bearings, if you like, around Colossians. He talked about the culture in Colossae, the pressures that the early Christians were facing, and how Paul writes in this mix of influences and philosophies and spiritual mashups. And one of the key ideas that Steve mentioned was this idea of syncretism. So that's when belief systems get blended together into like a spiritual pick and mix. A bit of this, a bit of that, whatever sounds good. Steve also mentioned a group called the Judaizers who were saying Jesus is good, but not enough. It was Jesus plus the old laws, Jesus plus festivals, Jesus plus tradition. And the pressure on the early church was to blend the gospel with empire, with legalism, with the cultural expectations and clever sounding philosophies. And in this letter, Paul is having none of it. He sees this kind of thinking for what it is, a watered down version of Jesus, an edited gospel, a story with all of the sharp edges removed. And honestly, that's not just a first century problem, is it? I think we still today feel that same pull. The story of Jesus gets squeezed into whatever the culture is selling at the time. Consumerism, self-help, politics, identity. We're constantly being told that the story of Jesus needs a bit of an update. But here's the thing. Paul doesn't just push back on that kind of thinking. He gives us something bigger, something better. And so today we're going to look at that, look at the better story, one that doesn't just add Jesus to the mix, but puts him right at the center. And if you've ever felt that tension of competing truths, unsure who to trust or what to believe, you're not alone. By competing truths, I mean all the different voices telling us what's real and what matters. Culture says one thing, politics says another, social media offers one version of the good life, while your faith or even your doubts might say something else entirely. And in the middle of all of that noise, it's easy to feel disoriented. Because whether we realize it or not, we're all living inside some kind of story, a script we follow, a lens we see through. It shapes how we see the world, how we think about God, and how we understand ourselves. Now, theologians call that a meta-narrative, the big story that helps us make sense of all of the smaller ones. It asks, who am I? Why am I here? What's the point of all of this? And today, Paul is going to show us what happens when Jesus takes center stage in that story. When he becomes the lens we see everything through. When he's not just part of the story, but the one who wrote it, holds it, and finishes it. So let's take a step back and set the scene. The church in Colossae was small, it was young. It wasn't a big player like Corinth or Ephesus, just a group of Jesus followers trying to stay faithful in the middle of the Roman Empire. Now, Paul's writing from prison, and he'd never met them, but he'd heard what was going on. He'd heard that the gospel they received was starting to get clouded by other ideas. Jesus was being blended with other stories. Colossae was fully part of the Roman Empire. Roman rule shaped their money, their roads, their calendar, laws, even their imaginations. Empire wasn't just physical, it was cultural, spiritual. It told a story. One where Caesar was Lord, Rome was eternal, and peace came through strength. And when people live inside a story long enough, they start to believe it. Paul sees what's at stake here. It's not just bad theology, it's competing imaginations. It's about which story is forming your life. The book Colossians Remixed, which is the book which is really shaping this series, puts it like this. When a whole population dreams the same dream, empire is triumphant. An alternative to the empire requires different dreams animated by a different narrative. That's the challenge. Whose dream are you living in? Whose story is shaping your hopes, fears, and identity? And here's the thing, this isn't just ancient history. It's not just something that happened in a faraway city 2,000 years ago. This is us too. We live in our own kind of empire, not one built on soldiers and chariots, but on algorithms and advertising. One that says your value is in what you buy, achieve, and how you look. Think about life pre-internet and post-internet. The world got smaller, faster. It became easier to mix belief systems, to cherry pick, to build a worldview on what feels good or sounds right. Paul's words still speak to us today, saying, don't let empire write your story. Don't blend the gospel until Jesus becomes unrecognizable. There is a better story. Not just a philosophy, not just moral advice, a reality that recenters everything around Christ. And Paul's about to make his case, not though with a logical argument or a theological checklist, but with something poetic, something beautiful, something that feels like a hymn or a worship song. And many scholars think that's exactly what this is, an early Christian creed that the church may have already been singing. Because sometimes prose isn't enough. When you're trying to express the deepest truths about Jesus, you need poetry. You need rhythm, imagination, a different kind of language to wake people up. Now, I'm going to read Colossians 1:15-22. Now, you can either follow along in your Bible, or the verses will be up on the screen. Or alternatively, you can just listen. Let it wash over you. So here we go, Colossians 1:15-22. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death, to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Let that just sit for a moment. Now, the thing about this text, it may be a poem, but it's also radical. Brian Walsh and Sylvia Kismat help us grasp just how radical this is. They write, in a world populated by images of Caesar, who is taken to be the Son of God, a world in which the emperor's preeminence over all things is bolstered by political structures and institutions, an empire that views Rome as the head of the body politic, in which an imperial peace is imposed, sometimes through the capital punishment of crucifixion, this poem is nothing less than treasonous. In the space of a short, well-crafted three-stanza poem, Paul subverts every major claim of the empire, turning them on their heads, and proclaims Christ to be the creator, redeemer, and Lord over all of creation, including the empire. The poem isn't just theology, it's worship, it's resistance. It's an alternative vision of reality, recentered around Jesus. Now, with that said, let's walk through it section by section. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. That's not just poetic, that's a bold, countercultural claim. In Paul's world, Caesar's image was everywhere, on coins, statues, temples. He was called the Son of the Gods. His image wasn't just political, it was spiritual. It told a story. Caesar ruled with divine authority. But Paul says, no, Jesus is the true image, not Caesar, not empire, not any earthly ruler or idol. Jesus is the visible expression of the invisible God. If you want to know what God is like, not just in theory, but in flesh and blood, you look at Jesus. Look at how he lives, how he speaks, how he touches the untouchable, how he lays down his life. Continuing on. For in him all things were created. All things have been created through him and for him. That includes everything. Heaven and earth, visible and invisible, thrones, powers, rulers, authorities. Paul's not being vague. He's covering every domain, every power structure, every corner of reality. Jesus isn't part of creation. He's the source of it. He's before it, above it, behind it, and the goal of it all. N.T. Wright, my favorite theologian, says this: the poem deliberately echoes Genesis and the language of Jewish wisdom literature. What Paul is doing is nothing less than reworking Jewish monotheism around Jesus himself. This isn't just saying that Jesus is important. It's saying he's the one through whom everything was made. Not just another voice. He's the author of the whole story. Continuing. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That's both personal and cosmic. Jesus isn't just the creator, he's the sustainer. He's the one who keeps the universe from falling apart, the one who keeps you from falling apart. When life feels chaotic or fragmented, this is your anchor. He holds it all. He holds you, not just the good bits. He holds the pain, the mess, the parts you want to forget. He's not overwhelmed by what overwhelms you. The next bit. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn among the dead. So now that in everything he might have supremacy. Now, Paul brings it into the present, into the church, into resurrection. Jesus isn't just the center of creation. He's the center of new creation. The church is his body. Resurrection begins with him. Life after death, wholeness after brokenness, hope after despair. It all flows from him. And here comes the word that ties it all together: supremacy. This is where we get the theology of the supremacy of Christ. It's not just as a title, but a claim about reality. We'll explore that more in a moment, but even here, Paul is clear. This isn't about dominance or control. It's about centrality. In everything, Jesus is to take first place. He's not one priority among many. He's the gravitational center, the one everything else orbits around and depends on. The world was made through him. It holds together in him, and it finds its purpose in him. By this point in the letter, Paul has lifted our eyes. He's taken us from the everyday struggles of a small church to a sweeping vision of Jesus, the true image of God, the center of creation, the source of peace, and the one who holds it all together. But this isn't just about theology, it's about allegiance, it's about confrontation with empire. Because in Paul's world, as I mentioned earlier, Caesar wasn't just in charge, he was worshipped. His image was everywhere: coins, statues, temples, parades. The empire had its own gospel, its own peace, its own savior. The Pax Romana promised peace, but through conquest, fear, and violence. And Paul dares to say, not Caesar, but Christ. He writes from prison under Roman rule and proclaims that Jesus is the true image, the true source of peace, the one who reconciles the world, not through domination, but through his blood. Again, as N.T. Wright puts it, Paul was pioneering a new kind of identity rooted in the Messiah Jesus, which offered a direct challenge to the imperial cult and its claims to shape reality. This was more than belief. It was resistance. Paul was reshaping imagination, calling the church to live a different story. And the same challenge faces us. We might not have emperors, but we have our own empires, not dressed in togas, but in logos, in brand loyalty, productivity culture, political theatre. Now, I'll go first. I admit it. I'm a bit of an Apple fan. Actually, scratch that. I am deep in the ecosystem. MacBook, iPhone, Apple Watch, Apple TV, even my media library is tied to iTunes. I'd go so far as to say if Apple shut down tomorrow, I'm just not sure how I'd function. I'm kidding, sort of. I'd survive unless I had to use Android or Windows or... No, I might have offended some of you. Sorry, not sorry. But seriously, that kind of brand loyalty is more than convenience. It shapes us. It forms identity. There's a rhythm, a comfort in it. And that's why this quote from James Smith hits hard. The Apple products are triggering the same bits of their brain as religious imagery triggers in a person of faith. This is your brain on Apple. It looks like it's worshipping. Smith reflects on neuroscience showing our brain's response to brands as being the same as they would respond to religious devotion. Apple doesn't just sell devices. It sells a story, a lifestyle, a sense of meaning and belonging. That's what Smith calls a cultural liturgy, habits and desires that shape us over time. It's discipleship, not through sermons, but through design, through narrative, through emotional appeal. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a rant against Apple. I'm not throwing my Mac in the bin, but it is a reminder. Worship doesn't start on a Sunday morning. It starts with what captures our attention, what stirs our desires, what shapes how we see ourselves. And that's the empire at work, not in robes and thrones, but in algorithms and advertising. And it's not just Apple. The empire of consumerism says you're empty, but the right purchase will fill you. The empire of achievement says you are what you do. The empire of image says you are how you are perceived. The empire of self says meaning comes from within, that you create your own truth. And Paul's poem cuts through all of it. Christ is supreme. Not your job, not your brand, not your politics, not your social following, not your fears, not your ambitions, not your comfort zone. And that's not just a bold statement. It's the center of a theology, the theology of Christ's supremacy. So what does that actually mean? So what do we mean when we talk about the supremacy of Christ? Paul says, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. And that word everything is doing a lot of work. The Greek word is protein, which it means to be first, but not just in a sequence, but in significance. First in rank, first in meaning, first in influence. As I mentioned earlier, supremacy here doesn't mean domination or control. It means Jesus holds the rightful place, not as one priority among many, but as the one everything else aligns around. He's the reference point, the foundation, the one in whom all things hold together and find their purpose. This is a theological claim that reshapes how we see the world, from creation to purpose to identity. Jesus is not just central to your faith. He's central to everything. And here's what makes it revolutionary. Paul says that Jesus doesn't claim supremacy by force. He claims it through sacrifice. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. The fullness of God, all of who God is revealed not in might, but in mercy. Not through conquest, but through the cross. Jesus doesn't crush enemies, he reconciles them. That's the theology of supremacy. That Christ is above all things and yet stoops low in love to redeem them. And Paul makes it personal. He says, once you were alienated from God, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death. This isn't just abstract theology. This is your story. You were distant, disconnected, caught in cycles of brokenness, but now you are brought near, reconciled, made holy, not because you earned it, but because Jesus made peace for you. So what does this all mean for us? What does it mean for us today? It means if Christ is supreme, then we don't have to be. We don't have to hold it all together. He already does. We don't have to earn our place. We've already been reconciled. We don't have to carry the world. The one who holds the galaxies holds us. This is not supremacy that crushes. It's supremacy that carries, that heals, that restores. Jesus doesn't just offer a better story. He is the better story. Better than Rome, which promised peace through power and worships its leaders as gods. Better than Apple, which builds loyalty through design and identity through products. Better than Amazon, which tells you everything you need is one click away. Better than the story that says salvation will come through a strong man, through charisma, through national greatness, or through one person who claims that they alone can fix it. We've seen what happens when politics becomes religion, when flags become sacred, when rallies feel like revivals, when leaders are followed with blind devotion rather than honest accountability. I'm sure you can't think of anyone that behaves like that, can you? Paul says no human can carry that kind of weight. Only Jesus is supreme. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't posture. He doesn't divide to conquer. He lays down his life to reconcile. The world is full of stories, political, commercial, technological, but only one holds together in love. Only one leads to peace. Only one story is truly better. So let me land with this, with a simple but important question. What story is shaping your life? Because something is. We're all being formed by habit, culture, algorithms, aspirations. We make decisions based on a script we rarely examine. Is it the story of success, of survival, of self? Is it the story that says you must earn your place, prove your worth, manage your image? Or is it the story of Christ, the one who created all things, who holds all things, who gave his life to reconcile all things, and who invites you to live in that reality? The philosopher Alistair MacIntyre once said, I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can answer the prior question of what story do I find myself a part? That's really it, isn't it? Because the answer to that question shapes everything. Your identity, your relationships, your values, your future. And Jesus doesn't just ask for agreement. He invites you into a new way of being, a new way of living, a new story that reshapes everything from the ground up. So here's what I'd love us to do. Let's just pause for a moment and ask ourselves quietly and honestly, what story am I living right now? Where have I placed my trust? What's been at the center of my life lately? And if you're feeling the pull of other stories, whether that be success, position, self, popularity, belongings, whatever other cultural story you find yourself part of, then the invitation today is simple. Come back to Jesus, the image of the invisible God, the one who made you, holds you, and gave everything to reconcile you. The one who is truly the better story.